Warning! You're watching Dr. Todd Lee TV, where theoretically you could learn a bunch of cool shit.
Can avocado be used as a substitute for jasmine rice?
I mean, she clearly doesn't know what macronutrients are. She just wants you to validate what she already did.
I spent so long teaching about
that,
macros.
Is that Puppy Le Pew behind you? It is Puppy
Yes.
Le Pew. Hey, Puppy
They're all
Le
going to
Pew.
be in here and sad because Garrett left and they all hate me. So they only like me when he's gone.
I see. So, everyone, greetings. It is another episode of Remedial Street Chemistry with, I am your host, Todd Lee, and this is my co-host, DJ Madsen. We are going to be discussing the smartest questions of all time, brought to us by the long attention span TikTok community, because the TikTok community has such good questions. Like, is avocado a substitute for rice? All right. So.
That was a good introduction to TikTok. I thought the questions we got were phenomenal compared to what I get normally.
Yeah, so you'll be seeing this episode like in 2 weeks. And in that window of time, you'll have gotten the live episode where I and DJ were sitting in those green chairs answering TikTok questions live. And I was less than polite because I didn't know that there were people that they were that stupid on the planet, and they seemed to all follow DJ.
What does that say about me? I don't know. It's that short form content, I'm telling you.
Yeah, it's clear that people who use TikTok have short attention spans. What was not clear is that people who use TikTok are dumb. So I think that having short attention spans, it goes hand in hand with being dumb, which is contradictory to the concept that the ADD crowd are smarter than the general population. I think that they learn faster than the general population, but that doesn't mean that they accumulate more knowledge or wisdom. That's possible.
I will say I've had very little conversion from TikTok to YouTube. They're all coming from different places, not from TikTok. So
yeah, I'd say that the YouTube crowd's actually the smartest crowd. Then Instagram, then Facebook, and TikTok is definitely a knuckle-dragging last place.
I'm under the impression that Facebook is now only for political rants and joining ladies' Tupperware parties.
It's for boomers. Everybody who's Generation X or like the older X's and the boomers use Facebook. The younger X's and millennials use Instagram, and Generation Z pretty much exclusively use TikTok.
TikTok's my primary platform. Oof.
But
rough.
But where do your clients actually come from?
Honestly, mostly referrals. I don't get a whole lot from social media.
Interesting. Okay.
I just beg people to say nice things about me.
Oh, I don't know. I've never tried to beg. Maybe that would work. I don't know. I think people would be uncomfortable lying and saying nice things about me.
I think you're very nice. It was exciting to meet you in person.
Aw, thank you.
Todd met my entire family. Todd did not just come down and see me and my husband. He met and played video games with my kids. He met both my parents, brother-in-law, nieces. Like, Todd met the entire family.
Your pig? No, it wasn't your pig. It was.
He thought he was going to come and just like do a quick visit, and I was like, nope, we're just going to throw you into everything and take you to a weird Texas steakhouse and do all of it.
3 sheep. I met 4 horses. I almost met 3 cows. They weren't very social cows. And then
they're busy humping each other.
That happened. And then there was that one Lumpy, which was the weirdest horse I've ever seen in my life. He was like a grouchy horse with half legs. He was so interesting.
He's like me in a horse form. He's got a big head.
All the horses.
He was a mini, by the way. He's a mini horse.
They're so.
And you met the chickens.
Yeah, I might. Well, chicken. I don't know. Do chickens really have a personality? I feel like chicken and fish are too primitive to really meet them.
Dude, chickens very much have personalities. So
Oh,
much, especially when you get like some of the more intricate breeds that are really tame and you can mess with them. Chickens definitely have
okay.
personalities.
I was surprised by how much a chicken looks like a dinosaur up close. Like
They're
it's
like watching little T-Rexes run around.
they're totally dinosaurs with feathers. They're so different than I expected them to be.
Yeah. I like chickens a lot. I'm a chicken person, so
Yeah, I don't know, man. I had a good time. It was a good time.
got to meet all the annoying dogs that are in the background, the naked ones. Todd didn't know that our dog's hair grew this way. He thought that
No,
we
I
just shaved them to be assholes. So
yeah, I thought that they just were shaved to be ridiculous. I didn't know that they genetically have like a mohawk and then pom poms and nothing else.
pom poms, and they do have little pom poms. They
Yeah, and
prance.
then they're like this, and they're like waving their pom poms. They're like cheering for food, like give me a treat, T, give me a treat, R. You know, that's what it looks like.
Annoyed
And
the
then
piss
like
out of you while
they're
you were eating.
so well, just Gaston, man. Gaston has no manners. He just gets up in your face and starts shaking because he's so high strung with his
He'll
diaper
blow in
on.
your face.
He's so weird. Gaston is so weird. All the rest of them were fine, except for Junior bit me, but that's just because he doesn't like people. But like
He hates
Pe-
everyone. It
Puppy
was
Le
his welcome
Pew,
bite. Then he demanded that you pet him.
I know Puppy Le Pew is by far my favorite, and then Panda. Panda was pretty cool too.
I love Panda.
And
Panda's
Rose was
glamorous.
too mean. I didn't want to go anywhere near Rose.
Rose just sleeps. She can't even be mean. She just sleeps
She's
23
blind
hours out of the
and
day.
deaf and wanders around waiting for someone just to put food in front of her. It's so weird.
Mighty nice life she has.
Yeah.
Next time you come down, we'll put you on a horse,
Yeah.
and we'll be
Hopefully I don't
better at filming.
hopefully I don't fall off of it.
No, we'll put you on a
Oh.
big saddle. You'll be fine.
Well, I just remember that episode where I mean in Generation Iron how Branch fell off his horse. And it was just like, oh, right after he was explaining how he never gets hurt. And then he goes and falls off his horse. And like there's this backstory
Yeah.
to that there's a big backstory to all that. And you actually hear what was going on behind the scenes in that movie. It wasn't all above board. So there's
Branches is, I think he's working cutting horses now. I think he might be showing.
that would be cool to see that. I don't even know what that is, but I'm sure it's cool.
A lot different. We do English, so we wear like really tight pants and like what look like pirate boots.
I like pirates.
Yeah, you'll look like a pirate if you ride English. Little itty bitty saddles.
Do I have to put on like
You basically wear
eye
leggings.
makeup so I can look like
You
Jack
might as well.
Sparrow? Just shave my head
No.
and then get a parrot.
I
That'd be
actually
weird.
ride Western. Garrett rides English, so
What is English when your legs are crossed on one side?
it's a. So they're different saddle types. One is like a very petite saddle used in like hunter jumper classes or dressage or saddle seat. They're basically different disciplines within it. Like in the weightlifting community, we have like bodybuilders and there's like power lifters and then like strongman. There's different disciplines. So you'd think that all horse people are horse people, but they're absolutely not. They're very divided, just like the lifting community is.
No way. So who would be the CrossFitters of the horse community?
Barrel racers.
Okay. And then who would be the power lifters of the horse community?
Halter horses.
Don't know what any of this means. And then who would be a bodybuilder of the
I'm going to
horse
show you
community?
pictures and you're going to be like, accurate.
Okay, that would be funny. If I was more sophisticated with this bullshit, I would be able to look that up and share my screen. But I know that
Dressage
would,
is like Pilates. That's what Garrett does.
I don't even know what Pilates are. I just know that there's a room that people go into and they do Pilates.
Fancy ladies in very cute, matching, expensive gym outfits doing stretchy things.
That's what I thought it was. It's like you get hooked up to like a rack, and then
It's like yoga, but harder. And then they have the transformer machines and they look like sex machines. They're not, but they double as sex machines. You can't convince me otherwise, especially if you have one in your house. But yeah, they're crazy looking.
Well, that is interesting. Just like the swing at your parents' house, that wasn't. I was just like, I look at it and I was like, and then you're like, that's not a sex swing. I'm like, well, the fact that I said nothing and you volunteered that it's not means that it is. I'm gonna keep
it's
walking.
an it's an aerial hoop for like aerobics, I guess, and like scarves, which sounds like I'm describing a sex swing. It's not a sex swing. It's not a sex swing.
And it was in the rumpus room too. It wasn't even in a bedroom. It was like a rec center, and it was just like, what is going on here? And the story just kept getting more. The further we went up in your parents' house, the more elaborately weird it got. Like, and then the final chamber, the dungeon at the top near the attic. I was just like, what is going on? It's like that's what all this land is for. So no one can hear the screams. It's like all the neighbors are so far apart. You can cry for help all you want. No one's going to come save you.
Yeah. Took you out in the boonies.
Yeah. All right. So people are
Welcome to
probably
Texas.
sick. People are like, why aren't you talking about steroids? You should kill yourself. I hate you. Was what this is 11 minutes
Drugs.
and we haven't covered anything that they want to hear yet. Like, you two should just get a phone call. All right.
Okay, so I was irresponsible and I did not collect any questions, but I did have a really good one that I thought we should discuss because we don't really address it a lot. Basically, especially because we work with people that are enhanced. Like you want to get jacked, that's what we work with. And we usually use injectable DHT derivatives as, a control mechanism for estrogen. Like we pretty much know, we talk about that a lot. I get a lot of questions and so much confusion around the use of aromatase inhibitors. A lot of people don't know the difference between those and selective estrogen receptor modulators. They don't know
Interesting.
when to deploy them, if they should. And then there's a lot of people that will probably never exceed 1,000 nanograms per deciliter for total test, but still have high estrogen. And they're not looking for performance. They don't work out. They're getting TRT from their doctor, but their doctor might be like, I don't believe in A.I.s. Or they go from a doctor that says, you will take an A.I. no matter what. I don't care what your E2 reads. So I thought that would be a good discussion to kind of touch on the people that are needing one of those in terms of performance enhancement and those that would never touch Primobolan or Masteron under any circumstances, but are still struggling with estrogen.
So I think the most useful time to use an AI is if you're working within the bounds of the U.S. legal system and you aren't willing to or able to use a safer compound like Masteron, which works has a metabolite like a SERM, or Primo, which has a metabolite like an AI, or both. That if you have no other choice but to use nothing but test and a Remidex, then you could use that. It's just that it's just so extreme overkill. It obliterates like 70 to 97% of the estradiol. And since we need the estradiol to optimize our GH to make IGF-1, then it really isn't the best thing to do is to wipe out your E2. Also, if your E2 gets too low, you can have low sex drive or depression, a number of other symptoms. That a low E2 is just as bad as a high E2. So if you optimize GH conversion IGF-1 somewhere between 40 to 100, and you're prone to getting gyno somewhere between 50 up, then there could be a point at which you have to keep your E2 lower than what's optimal for GH because you want to avoid the gyno. And that's understandable and totally commendable. That's why there's a little bit more nuance to what you can do. But using the simplest approach of using Arimidex, which is what most HRT doctors would prescribe, what they have people do is they took one pill a week or something, which it's half a pill every 3 days. Either way, your levels are up and down, and having a high amplitude between the low and the high, the bigger the amplitude, the more side effects. So rather than taking a sixth of an Arimidex every day, it just makes more sense to match your Primo with your test to get a fixed level of E2, approximately 40. And the beauty of that is it doesn't matter if it's 250, 250 or 1,000, 1,000. It always seems to be when you match your test with your Primo, you're going to get 40. Now, obviously, some people are going to get 50, some people are going to get 30, and you could go like 1.1 of one and 0.9 of the other. But so you could be a little bit less in the Primo or a little bit more in the Primo to perfectly modulate your E2. But that's not legal. The legal thing to do is use the Aromatase. And people attribute a lot of side effects to Aromatase, but really most of the side effects of Aromatase are just the side effects of a low E2.
And when you see, do you have a preference? If somebody is a candidate or is using an AI, do you have a specific brand preference? Like, is there one that you prefer over another, or like a reversible binding? Like, I think a Remedex versus what is one that starts with an E?
Oh, exemestane,
Yes. Do you have a
So
personal preference?
yeah, I prefer. Okay, so there's two classes of aromatase inhibitors. There's reversible competitive inhibitors, and there's irreversible suicide inhibitors. So the Arimidex and letrozole, also known as Femera, they're so anastrozole is Arimidex, and letrozole is Femera. I believe it's called Femera, and they are 97 and 99% effective from what I've seen. And that says, and one is 1 milligram and the other is 2.5 milligrams. So they're not equal potency and they're not equal efficacy. And since you're dealing with rounder numbers with Arimidex and it's cheaper and easier to get easier to get a doctor to prescribe it, pretty much just everyone uses Arimidex synonymously with competitive aromatase inhibitors. Kind of like people say Coke when they mean Coca-Cola brand cola, when there's Pepsi Cola, RC Cola, all the other colas out there. But same thing goes for the suicide inhibitors. Exemestane is 65% suppression. So it's a much more manageable one. That's why people say Aromacin is better to run than Arimidex, because it doesn't wipe out your estrogen. It knocks it down to a third. Now, another one that's over the counter that I've had in previous products that were designed for estrogen modulation is 7,8-benzo. 7,8-benzo is legal, it's over the counter, and it is a 50% suicide inhibitor. So it literally just cuts your E2 in half semi-permanently. Like the enzyme is destroyed, and then your body has to make more of that enzyme. It's different than just a competitive inhibitor, where if you were running enough tests, eventually the test would bump off the ADEX from the aromatase enzyme. The aromatase enzyme has that receptor site on the aromatase enzyme is competitively inhibited by the ADEX. The ADEX has a higher binding affinity than test. But if you drive up the concentration of test high enough, eventually the test would start pushing off the ADEX and you'd get aromatization and conversion of testosterone to estradiol. So the answer to your question, the simplest and easiest way to do it would actually be 7,8-benzo, and you could use that every day at a lower dose. The exact dosing of it, you basically would have to test it, receptor map it, is on a fixed amount of testosterone. You titrate up on the 7,8-benzo until you get the estradiol you want, and then you stay there. So if the estradiol that gives you no side effects and maximum IGF-1 conversion is 80, then you basically just keep adding in the 7,8-benzo until you have an 80 estradiol, and then you stay there. Now, if you wanted to increase your load of testosterone, then you'd have to re-receptor map it. So you have like an ideal amount of 7,8-benzo for this much testosterone. And then you have a separate column in wherever you keep your documentation that's like, for this much testosterone, I need this much 7,8-benzo. And if you do that enough, you can create a best fit line, but the best fit line may not be linear. It might be exponential or it might be asymptotic. that there might be a certain point where the 7,8-benzoyl will no longer control testosterone, and you have to use something stronger like A.I.s. Now you have to start the whole process of experimentation over again. So that's why a lot of people just start with the A.I.s, because they know that there's no limit to how much suppression you're going to get with A.I.s. The worst case scenario, if you're running a gram of testosterone, you could run an A.I.s every day, and it might still keep you in a safe zone of E2. Because that 97% suppression is based off of naturally occurring testosterone levels, which is approximately 5 to 15 milligrams per day. That's not accounting for someone who's running 100 milligrams or 150 milligrams of test a day. You might not get 97% suppression at that point. It's probably not linear suppression. It's probably asymptotic suppression.
I think a lot of people they understand that estrogen needs to be kept in check, but they don't necessarily understand the purpose of these compounds, or not only that, but how they work. There seems to be the term estrogen blocking is something I hear a lot, and it is used to describe a lot of different compounds that all act differently. And then again, this is kind of where having that background really comes into play, so you can actually understand what's happening and how the compounds are working. And that's also how you can effectively titrate specific dosages and monitor these numbers. A lot of people do not know the difference between an AI and a SERM. And especially when we go to like the TikTok crowd or the recreational young crowd that really doesn't have any background or understanding of what an aromatase enzyme is, what aromatase conversion is, how cytochromes function. Like when you lack that information, it can make compound function very difficult. And then it's a very elementary understanding. It's an umbrella, stuff you'd Google on a form. It's very simplified. But again, that's problematic when you start creating, these complex stacks and experimenting with polypharmacy and trying to manage your E2. I see a lot of people trying to use SERMs and A.I.s interchangeably. What situations do you implement SERMs?
So a selective
I have to
estrogen
cough, so I'm going to mute myself.
Okay. Selective estrogen receptor modulators are basically a competitive inhibitor, just like A.I.s is a competitive inhibitor for the aromatase enzyme. A SERM is a competitive inhibitor for the estrogen receptor. So it binds to the estrogen receptor, and it stops it from having the agonist bind to it. So in this case, estradiol is the strongest of the estrogens. It'll bind to the estrogen alpha receptor and promote female functioning, or estrogen beta receptor and either inhibit the estrogen alpha receptor and or promote basically positive anabolic effects. So most of the stuff that men want out of estradiol is through the estrogen beta receptor, including inhibition of the estrogen alpha receptor. Women want both estrogen alpha and estrogen beta. So for example, the best example of this, the first line of defense to understanding the material, is breast tissue growth. So the estrogen alpha receptor stimulates breast tissue growth. The estrogen beta receptor seems to inhibit breast tissue growth. So we would want, the difference between tamoxifen and raloxifene is vast. What I do know about the tamoxifen is that it is a pro drug. It's almost like a pro hormone to make 2 or 3 metabolites. And then one of those metabolites is estrogen alpha antagonist. And one of the metabolites is an aromatase inhibitor. So tamoxifen functions as both an aromatase inhibitor and as an receptor modulator, whereas raloxifene is not a prodrug. Raloxifene just is what seems to be either a beta agonist or an alpha antagonist. I'm not sure which. I know that the tamoxifen causes IGF-1 levels to go down, and raloxifene can cause IGF-1 levels to go up. So would it imply that they don't bind to the same receptors? So, and then this gets really esoteric, that it could be that the raloxifene is really good and directly binds to the estrogen alpha receptor, inhibiting it, but then it doesn't wipe out your total estrogen, which can now is freed up to bind to the estrogen beta receptor, which then stimulates the IGF-1, but also inhibits breast growth. So I don't know enough about Raloxifene to do a video about it, but what I do know is that it's better than Tamoxifen. So all the times you would deploy Tamoxifen, you probably could deploy Raloxifene, but I'd have to study it more to learn more about it. I also have never used Raloxifene. So recently I did that video where I talked about one or the other. I did a Gyno video that was re-released, and people are flipping out because I don't talk about Raloxifene. And I kept having to say in the comment, like, I've never used Raloxifene, so I'm not going to make a video about it. And since I've had my breast tissue
think the reason why it's the go-to is one singular study was done, and I think they compared the two, and the Raloxifene had a better outcome for gynecomastia reversal, but it was only, as far as I know, it's only been one study. And I think the reason why it has, if I'm being completely honest, the reason why it's kind of become the industry standard isn't because of the singular data that they got from that study, but it's because Derek with More Plates, More Dates did a huge segment on it and said this is the SERM that should be utilized for any type of reversal protocol. And then that kind of just went from there. It just became the rule of thumb.
And I'm not disagreeing with him. However, before we had Raloxifene, Tamoxifen worked great. And Raloxifene,
and I have used it, but only in a reversal protocol. I have never used it outside of gyno reversal. And I had one client that came to me, and he came to me because he was struggling with E2 issues, and it was freshly onset, and it was successful.
Right.
Like it was, we had a lot of success with it.
It would have also, Tamoxifen would have worked in that situation as well. So,
and that's what most people, I think, it's also more readily available to the average person.
Right. And then the other difference is, since Tamoxifen takes up to 68 days to reach plasma concentration, Raloxifene's plasma concentrations reach instantly. So in the future, I probably would use Raloxifene with people. I just would have to disclose, like, I've never used this on myself, so I don't know exactly what's going to happen from an individual standpoint. But what I do know is about Tamoxifen. So Tamoxifen has two metabolites, and it takes about 68 days for those metabolites to reach peak concentration because they have really, really long half-lives. And then the treatment needs to be for several months, and then you can pull the drug, but then they're out of your system. However, it only inhibits IGF-1 conversion by 30%. I think it's 37% for men, 14% for women. And the actual study itself reads stupid. It says females and males experience between 14 and 37% reduction in IGF-1 production. And I'm like, that is a stupid statement, because it sounds like what you're saying is both women and men have the same outcome, which is a 14 to 37% reduction. They should have said females experience a 14% reduction and men experience up to a 37% reduction. So it just, like often is the case, these scientists who write these studies are absolutely terrible at English. And so even if they have the greatest data in the world, they can't communicate those findings correctly in the actual written word. So short of looking at the charts and the tables, those papers are almost useless because their English is so bad, they can often communicate the opposite idea than what they're trying to communicate. So to go through all that work and do all that science and spend all that money to get this data, and then to have merely not putting commas in the sentence and making the information useless, that's just a travesty. And you know that if you got a hold of that scientist and emailed him and asked him, he'd give you an answer so he doesn't sound stupid, but he'd never just say, honestly, I don't remember what I found, and yeah, I really don't know how to speak English correctly, because most of these academics are extremely arrogant, and they could never admit that they have any faults at all. So they would never just say, yeah, I suck ass at English. I have no idea how to communicate these findings. I should have had a literate grad student write my paper for me. But instead, whatever. Plus, the person at the top of that article is the department chair where that university was, where the study was done. They're never the one who actually does the research. It's always grad students. It's always like the fourth, fifth, or sixth person down the list that actually did the research. But they're never going to get the credit. It's always the department head. And the department head is department head because he's an administrator. Usually they sucky scientists, but they're good at kissing ass at like cocktail parties, and so they move up the ranks. It's the same thing with the hospital. Like if you have the head of endocrinology, he's probably the worst endocrinologist, but he's the best at sticking his tongue in the nuns or other hospital administrators' asses. And that's why he got the promotion to be the head of the department. And the reason why I say nuns is because a council of nuns run Catholic hospitals. And that's not accountants and nuns run the Catholic hospitals. I don't know who runs the non-Catholic hospitals, but I know this because I chose
tongue up their ass for sure.
Yeah, I chose the Catholic hospital to work at because I wanted to be bulletproof against having to commit abortion. I didn't want to be an abortionist. I didn't want to murder babies. And the only way to be safe from being forced to murder babies is to work at a Catholic hospital, since they won't murder babies at Catholic hospitals.
I did not know you worked at a Catholic hospital.
Yep. I don't, it was really important to me not to kill babies. I mean, I know that that's totally politically incorrect to say that you don't want to kill babies, but for me, I just think that that's kind of like a common sense thing. Like normally you'd have to be a chaotic evil just to go around and killing babies. But I guess it's lawful evil to kill babies because it's legal.
I think you're absolutely entitled to procedures you do and do not want to perform if it impedes on your own moral code.
What's funny is that you'd think so, but that's not how it is in America. You're obligated. No. You're obligated to kill babies unless you're at a Catholic hospital. It's the only way to get around it.
So you were at a Catholic hospital then?
Yeah. I'd like to thank our sponsor, Fusion Regenerative Therapies, where I am the Director of Human Performance. This is the practice in which I practice medicine. We'll be able to order you blood work and read your blood work and help you with therapy as needed based upon the results of your blood work. Please click the link to get a consult with me, and I can help you optimize your performance. Thank you.
All right, so follow up.
Yeah.
Follow up to that. Let's say you have crashed your estrogen. How long do you typically see recovery from that? What does that look like a timeline? Let's say you've crashed it with Aromatase. What does that look like, and when do you recommend pulling labs? Because I find that most people that are anti-AI, once implemented, will be too late and way too much, way too aggressive, and then they've crashed it completely. What protocol do you recommend? Do you recommend easing off, stopping entirely? How do you approach that?
Remember when we were playing Mario Kart? How they said, you're like, A is the gas.
And you were blind?
Yeah, I was like, A is the gas. And they're like, okay, what's the brakes? And like, there is no brakes. So I basically have that approach towards Gyno. Is my first reaction is, let's pull down the test dramatically. Not so much, let's step on the SERMs. So if I pull the substrate, then I indirectly pull the estrogen. And I can replace what I took out with Primo, and that'll help me control the E2 dramatically. Once I can get that E2 into a healthy zone, like 20 to 40, then I can use Masteron, because its metabolite is a SERM. So I don't have to use Arimidex. I don't have to use Tamoxifen. I can use Primo and as a version of Adex, and I can use Masteron as a version of Raloxifene, because it's a beta agonist, which works as an alpha antagonist. So it's healthier than using a SERM, because I'm stimulating all the good receptors in a man, and I'm inhibiting the bad receptors indirectly through the good receptors function. Plus, I've removed the E2. So even if I wiped out their estrogen entirely by using Masteron, you still can provide the beta receptors as substrates. You still get beta receptor activities. So the bone, the liver, that produces the HDL, the IGF-1, all the stuff we want that's good out of estrogen, we can get out of the metabolite of Masteron, in theory. Now, I don't know of a better option for a beta receptor agonist than Masteron. So it's not like I know for certain Raloxifene is a beta receptor agonist and only a beta receptor agonist, never was more and never will be more than a beta receptor agonist. So therefore, I don't know for sure that Raloxifene is safer. For example, I used to think that Tamoxifen was nothing more than an alpha receptor antagonist, but it turns out that it's not. It's a prodrug to 2 to 3 different metabolites that have different functions. And depending on your genetic code, is which of those metabolites gets produced and how much of it. So in one person, tamoxifen might be more of an AI, and another person, tamoxifen might be more of an alpha antagonist.
All right, I'm going to plug a video here for you because Todd doesn't plug videos himself. There's a lot of people that don't necessarily understand why certain DHT derivatives can have a downward effect on E2. And there's a lot of theories out there, especially if you get on some of these crazy ass forums, you're going to see a lot of people saying, well, it's a competitive agonist with the aromatase enzyme. It's competing with testosterone. That's not how it works. And that's not the function of the aromatase enzyme specifically. What is it? CYP19A1. That's not it. That's not how it works. So if you want kind of a more detailed understanding of what binding affinity Masteron and Primo are going to have, Todd did a video that outlined this, and smack dab in the middle of the video goes over the SERM-like effects or aromatase inhibition effects of each compound in detail. What is the name of that video, Todd?
It's probably the Primo versus Masteron advanced discussion with Kurt. Although I had done also a Masteron video with Kurt. I also did a Primo versus Masteron standalone video. So I have probably 4 or 5 videos. I think it was a
combination video, but that's, if you are looking for a more deep understanding of actual binding affinities with these compounds and how that the end result is a reduction in E2, Todd does have that on his channel as well, because that base information a lot of people don't understand. They just know that they just need to bring them in, and they don't necessarily know why or how it's working.
And I think a lot of people, I don't think there is anybody who understands how that stuff works until me and Kurt kind of figured it out together, where like he had all the puzzle pieces, but I'm really good at assembling the puzzle and getting the big picture because I'm a top-down thinker. And he's a bottom-up thinker, so he's really good at validating and finding just what's a real puzzle piece versus a bullshit puzzle piece. But I'm like really good at seeing the whole big picture and knowing what puzzle pieces I'm missing. Then I basically like, hey, Kurt, I'm missing this puzzle piece. And he's like, okay, I'll find it. Then he goes and finds me the puzzle piece. Then I plug it in. I'm like, oh, it doesn't fit like that. Let's rotate that puzzle. Let's plug it in this way. It's like, no, that doesn't work. What about this? It was like, well, I'm missing this puzzle piece over here. Oh, shit, it fits over here. Okay, great. Well, we're still missing this puzzle piece, but we filled this puzzle piece. And we can get around this puzzle piece this way. And it's that gives us a clue of where that puzzle piece will be. So me and Kurt,
I think a lot of people forget, especially because we talk about real basic concepts, particularly on here, and answer a lot of TikTok questions. Todd's background is biochemistry. So there's a lot of theories that you'll see in terms of anabolic compound deployment. And that's the thing, is like a lot of them are theories because we're not studying these in this, in this specific situation. There's not a lot of practical application in how we're using them. So you kind of have to have that background in order to form those assessments. If you don't have it and you don't understand even basic physiological functions, which is where I'm struggling a little bit right now, it's hard to make those assessments, and then you really just don't know what you're doing. You're going based off of forum information at that. Well, so especially when we start trying to use other compounds to modulate hormones.
The problem is a lot of these people that don't have the foundational education, they might be very smart people, but they're engineers or they have a high school degree. They read a study and they accept that as if it's fact. They don't understand that these studies are often corrupt studies paid for by someone who has an agenda, and or the scientists don't know anything about bodybuilding, and they aren't testing even humans. They're testing rats. Rats don't lift weights. Rats don't take steroids. Rats don't eat chicken and rice. They're basically testing the wrong species with the wrong lifestyle. Your rats don't. My rats eat chicken and rice. But And then even if they test humans, what are they testing? Like Masteron was tested on women with breast cancer. So the conclusion is it's not anabolic because the studies didn't show it's anabolic. It's like the whole fucking point of Masteron. It's called mast in returns to breast, because a mastectomy is removing a boob. So it's booberon, basically. It's for shrinking boobs. That doesn't mean it doesn't grow muscle just because it's for shrinking boobs. It's like, it's so stupid. It's like, just because it's called Primo doesn't make it the best. It's just what they named it. If, for instance, Jet's Pizza's slogan is "We're the best," and that's considered legally fluff. It's not a false advertisement. You're allowed to make qualitative opinion claims in your marketing material for a business that it doesn't necessarily have to be backed up with fact without it being outright lying. So Jet's slogan, "We're the best," is the best slogan, because idiots will believe it. They're like, "Oh, well, Jets is the best." Well, how do you know that? It's like, it says so on the building. They couldn't put it there if it wasn't true. It's like, they most certainly can. The only part of the label that matters is the nutritional facts. Everything outside the nutritional facts, it's like avocado oil spread. And then if you look under the nutritional facts, it's the 9th ingredient's avocado oil. It's mostly made with soy oil. That's still legally true. And so idiots just look at the front of the label and they're like, "I wonder if I can have this." And they take a picture of it and they send it to their coach. Like, "Can I eat this?" It's like, how the fuck should I know, brain dead? Flip it over and look at the nutritional facts. Send me a picture of the shit that matters. Who the fuck would think that the front of the label matters? And it's like, morons.
99% of people.
Yeah, total fucking morons would think that the front of the label is what matters. The nutritional facts is the only thing that matters. The only thing legally protected in that label is in that box that's called nutritional facts. Everything outside that label can be total bullshit. So how did we get on this? Oh, I was saying that just because it's called Masteron doesn't mean it's just for titties. It could be for growing muscle too, because it's still going to bind to the androgen receptor. Just because there's no study that shows Masteron grows muscle doesn't mean it doesn't.
Again, practical application, we see it work that way. Okay, so this is kind of delicate territory, I guess. Let's say we have someone that's on physician prescribed TRT, true blue TRT. Like, there are levels 600, 800 on a good day.
True blue.
They feel like they might be experiencing estrogenic side effects, and they ask their physician to check that. This is a pretty common scenario. Physician says, "You're not on enough testosterone to have that issue," when we know damn well anything is possible on any dose. It's individual. What can patients that are going a legal avenue through their primary care and going through their physician, they're not going through someone like you independently, they're using their insurance for this and they are bound by that, what can they do to encourage their physician to pull abs? Is that like allows? Can that be something where they bring in like a patient care advocate? Can they force it? I mean, to me, I think it's kind of irresponsible not to pull follow-ups, especially pulling estrogen when you're bringing any type of exogenous hormone into the equation. But it happens a lot. What can patients do to get around that?
I mean, ultimately, the question is almost like a thought exercise. It's not a realistic situation. The realistic thing would be like, if you want something good, you have to pay for it. If it's free, it sucks. So if you got free medicine from some idiot who doesn't know what he's doing, then accept that you've outgrown that dumbass and hire a real doctor to fix it. So just get a consult with me and I'll order the blood work. You'll have the E2. You can either hire me to be your doctor and I can prescribe to you and make you right. Or if you want to stay working through the insurance, then all I would do is order you just the E2 and the lab draw. It might be as little as $50, much cheaper than going to Quest or LabCorp by itself. And then we could, instead of using your phone call to talk to me where I explain to you that the number on the page is the number on the page, which is surprisingly often, you could say instead you're going to use the consult you paid for to have me talk to your doctor. So I can basically ask him questions politely so that he realizes that he talks himself into a corner and he doesn't really know what he's talking about. And then when I explain to him what's what, he may be open to the idea of listening. Most of these doctors the less they know, the more arrogant they'll be, and the less likely they'll be to listen to reason. If they're a primary care doctor, they have almost no experience at all with this. So in my personal experience, find that any time I've ever talked to a male doctor, they've been more than happy to listen, and they treat me with respect, listen to what I have to say, and usually follow my advice. The only times I've ever ran into that issue where even if they don't have any idea what they're doing and they admit that they don't have any doing, they refuse to listen, is when it's someone who is my doctor. That the idea that they can't let the patient have any type of control over the relationship because they lose their authority, and then it's all a power struggle, whether it's man or woman. But if it's any male doctor that isn't my direct superior, they're more than happy to listen. I find that in general, anytime a man tries to correct a woman doctor, then it turns into mansplaining and it becomes a feminist male versus female conflict. So if you happen, I know this is often the case, you have a man who's going to a woman for his male hormones, and they often undertreat him and prescribe him 50 milligrams of testosterone every 2 weeks because they don't believe in masculinity. So they're castrating him chemically, and he's trusting them because they're a doctor. And almost always it turns out they're not actually a doctor, they're just a PA. So they have imposter syndrome because they're not a doctor. But when someone makes the mistake of calling them doctor because they're wearing a white coat, they accept it. And that's what they live for. They live for being validated.
Yeah, they won't correct you.
They won't correct you and say, I'm actually just a PA. I'm not a physician. I'm a physician's assistant. They won't ever say that they'll let you keep calling them doctor because that creates the authority that they have over you that they desperately wanted. They just weren't smart enough to get into medical school.
All right. So I have one more for estrogen that I'm really curious because I don't know this at all. Typically when we have somebody that E2 is slightly out of range, maybe they're getting on some side effects, or we want to bring it down a little bit. Most of my clients are the volume of liquid is too much. We're using too much testosterone to administer subcutaneously on a frequent basis. A lot of them we're doing, but as a rule of thumb, that's a recommended route to take is like, hey, you're injecting once a week. Let's change it to more frequent subcutaneous injections, which is absolutely feasible and ideal for reducing E2 conversion. That's ideal. However, I don't have any clients that are on low enough amounts of testosterone to actually do this. When we switch from maybe a once weekly IM injection to more frequent subcutaneous injections, what type of reduction can you see in conversion? Is it going to be something significant?
I just don't believe.
Could that really be used as a control mechanism, or is it just going to be, a slight amount?
It's a huge amount. Nothing is more important than doing daily injections. Nothing a patient can do can improve their quality of life better than switching from even 3 times a week to 7 times a week injections. But the misnomer is that the sub-Q has an advantage over IM. See, you've got a double variable here. It's not the sub-Q has lower estrogen conversion to IM. It's 7 times a week has a lower E2 conversion than 1 time a week. So you change 2 variables at the same time.
Spikes.
You changed frequency of injection and depth of injection at the same time. And so a lot of people who aren't scientifically minded have attributed incorrectly the improvement. Like I think Victor Black made this misunderstanding. It's not the fact that it's sub-Q that has less E2 conversion. It's the fact that you're doing it every day has less E2 conversion. IM is still superior to subcutaneous. Subcutaneous almost always results in skin irritation. So you and
I both do frequent. Well, I do frequent IM injections. You do daily IM, right?
Daily IM, and I only advocate daily IM to people at 20 milligrams 7 times a week. I'm pretty strict about it. It's one of my biggest pet peeves is people pushing back about daily injections. It's just, there's no science to it. It's just sheer laziness. If they simply said, I am a fucking pussy and I don't want to use a needle every day, or I'm so fucking lazy I don't want to use a needle every day, then at least I would accept it, because at least they're in touch with their inner pussy. But the idea that they're saying some type of bullshit to me about how it makes more sense to do 3 times a week injections than 7 times a week injections, that's what makes me livid. Let me give you an example. They went to a bunch of college kids and they said, what's better, socialism or capitalism? And they all said socialism. And then they said to the same college kids, it's like, okay, how about we take your parts of your GPA and give it to kids with lower grades? And they're like, absolutely not. And they're like, why not? And they're like, we worked hard for our grades. I was like, well, these people you want to take money away from worked hard for their money. And these stupid fuck college kids couldn't admit that they were hypocrites. They had to double down and argue that there's a difference between GPA and money. And that socialism with your parents' money or people older than you's money is okay, but socialism with your grades isn't. It's the same situation I deal with men who don't want to do injections every day. They want to do 2 injections a week or 1 injection a week, is that they want to just get it over with because they don't like giving shots, but they'll never admit that that's why they don't do it, is because they don't like needles. They'll always say, well, so-and-so says you should do it this way, and so-and-so says you should do it that way. And I was like, you don't know what the fuck their argument even means. Now, you can't possibly come at me and say so-and-so says this, because you're resting on their credibility, and they don't have the credibility I have. So that if your subject authority has less subject authority than I do, then they're not a subject authority over me. So you relying on this non-credentialed expert over me is not a valid argument that you would make to me. To a third person, you would make it, but you can't trump my degrees with their lack of degrees and that they therefore must be right. Just, you would have to make the argument yourself that it makes sense because of this. The area under the curve is higher with sub-Q injections, or the area under the curve is higher with 3 times a week injections, that the amplitude of between peak and trough is insignificant, that there isn't upregulated aromatase activity when you do have peaks, whereas if you have a straight line, there is no upregulation of 5-alpha reductase or aromatase activity. And 99% of them have no fucking idea what I just said. No fucking clue. They don't know what an aromatase enzyme is. They don't know what a 5-alpha reductase is. They don't know what peak versus trough. They don't know what the word amplitude means. They don't have any concept of pharmacokinetics. They can't see the graphs in their head. They just don't want to do shots like a man every day. And if they do, they want to do it under the skin because they think it hurts more to go in the muscle, which it doesn't. So this is the biggest pet peeve I have in 2022, 2023, and probably going into 2024, is this extreme resistance to doing things the correct way. And then wanting to take a bunch of drugs like A.I.s and SERMs to compete against an E2 you shouldn't have if you just did it right in the first place and did a microdosing every day intramuscularly.
So almost all of my clients come to me doing once weekly injections or less, I might add.
Oh my God.
First thing we do is increase frequency. Have you been able, because again, I haven't been in this specific scenario. Have you been able to take someone off an AI just by changing injection frequency, like somebody that was reliant on one?
100% of the time.
Awesome.
100%, 0.0%
just
of the
suck it up and inject every day.
Yeah, it's like they're literally taking a hormone to be a man, but they won't be a man to get the hormone to be a man in their body. It is the most ironic.
And for anyone watching, I'm a girl, clearly. I inject daily. While I'm not using testosterone, I still do daily injections. And
every girl does.
If you're going to bother putting something in your body, you should do it correctly. Like, nobody likes needles. Like, unless you're a masochist, nobody's like, wow, I cannot wait to stab myself today. Like, that's not our thought process. You don't have to be excited to do it, but if you're going to put stuff in your body, do it correctly.
What's so funny,
and especially if it allows you to get off of additional compounds you don't need.
What's so funny is I've never had a woman complain about daily injections. Women who've never used a needle their whole life, they're like, okay, and they just do it. Never had any pushback from a single woman ever about daily injections. But all of these men are whining about doing daily injections and how they want to do 3 times a week. It's so fucking pathetic. It's like, I understand why women don't want to have sex with men these days, is they're such little bitches. It's so fucking pathetic that they won't do daily injections. But every woman will do it, but guys won't. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. Even I do it. And the first time I gave myself an injection, I made sure I was sitting on my bed because I was quite sure I was going to pass out. Like, it's not something I look forward to, but like, I do it. You do what is, you do what's best. It doesn't really matter what your feelings are about it. You need to increase injection frequency, whether you like needles or not. It's not about what you like. You want to take testosterone to look better, feel better, be better. Do it correctly.
Yeah, it's so shameful.
If I can do it, anyone can do it. I should have had you inject me while you were here. I have skin like a football. I'm like a buffalo. It sucks.
You just twist. You stick the needle in a little bit and then start twisting, and it just drills right through. So, yeah, it's so shameful. I can't imagine how ashamed. I don't know how ashamed of myself I would be if I was like them and only did 3 times a week injections. I wouldn't even be able to look in the mirror.
Well, then there's the men that won't take injections at all. So
I don't think any of them would ever admit that to me. I think that every single guy has enough wisdom to know that I wouldn't put them out if they were on fire. If I found out that they were such pussies, they wouldn't use needles. I would just let them burn. I'm like, we have to stop this DNA from spreading like they're a virus.
You would not believe how many people are trying to run oral only stacks.
Oh, I do all the time.
Now that Clomiphene is so easily accessible.
They don't admit that's why they want to run it. They just get butt sore when you're like, D-ball's worthless, Anadrol's worthless. They're like, no, it's not. I put on a lot of thighs. It's like, no, you're just a fucking bitch who won't do the real drugs and use injections.
People will defend D-ball.
Yeah.
For a dying day.
I mean, I can understand. I can understand if it's some little SARM goblin where they're like a child and they're basically using SARMs because they think that that's something that is cool. It's something that they saw on TikTok, that you get some Gymshark stringers and then it comes with some free SARMs. Dude, it's rad. It's rad 140, man. It's just like, they don't understand how pathetic they sound when they talk about their little SARMs. But it's like, I could understand why a child who lives with their parents and doesn't want to get caught with needles, because parents are stupid and they think needles are a worse form of administrating drugs. But pills are okay, but needles aren't. When needles are a much better form of administration than oral. You have absorption of 100% with the needle. You have very little absorption with orals, depending on what you're eating. And you don't, and specifically that.
Yeah, if your mom finds your sock stash and your SARMs under your bed, you can tell her it's like a sports supplement you got at the health shop. She finds needles, it's a different conversation.
Right. So I can understand why someone doesn't want needles because they have some type of parental oversight. But if you're a grown-ass man and you live on your own and you have no one to answer to, the idea that you'd rather do the more dangerous drug with the least efficient way possible rather than a safer drug, a more efficient way, because you're afraid of an insulin syringe. Like, I could even understand if there was a hypodermic, but we're talking about an insulin syringe every day. There's no fucking excuse for that.
Yeah, it's tiny.
Well, they know all about tiny.
But not enough to actually inject the real stuff. All right, I didn't actually get questions today, but I just want to show everyone your shirt because it's cool.
Baphomet. This is the DJ Madsen official shirt. Does it say M&M on it? What is
on the back it does.
What does it actually
say? It has like a
say?
logo at the top.
What does it say?
I think it says one more rep.
Oh, okay.
And then it has like a little plate on it. And then the M&M logo's on the back. Just spreading joy.
Spreading those lats.
Just screenshot that and put that on my Facebook.
All right. Hopefully it was a good angle.
It was good. It's blurry on my end, but I'm sure it's clear on yours. So
All right, cool.
great internet.
I'm going to go hit legs for the first time in 2 weeks. My knees are feeling better after not wearing knee wraps. People are like, oh, you're the pussy. You don't hit legs every week. It's like, yeah, if you're injured and you're on vacation, it's not a good idea to do legs while you're out of town, so you can make the injury so bad that you have to spend your vacation in the ER. That's something we call wisdom.
Challenging yourself on brand new equipment's not ideal.
Nope. And eventually you'll get to the point, boys, that all the SARMs in the world aren't going to help you. You have to start taking your sets close to failure. And you don't want to do that with random shit where you're not able to get yourself help you need. If you don't have your massage therapist on hand, if you don't have already a relationship with a chiropractor or a doctor, if you can't get surgery rapidly where you're at, there's no reason to risk injuring
Not worth the risk.
And an elbow and a knee are a world of difference. You can still walk around and have a good time with only one arm. You can't really do anything on vacation with one leg. All right. Well, it's been real. I will talk to you later.
Thank you.